is dropping, so let's get in tune. AI Grok to innovation so soon. X unleashed through the images fly. FalconMamba, we're reaching the sky.
And that's it for the AI intro song. By the way, I use the same song for the intro and the outro, and it's clipped at the beginning, and you can hear the full version of that song at the end, in case you didn't know. But anyway, welcome to Last Week in AI, where you can hear us chat about what's going on with AI. And as usual, we will summarize last week's most interesting AI news. I am one of your hosts, Andrei Kurenkov. I finished a PhD at Stanford, now work at a generative AI startup, and apparently am not the best podcast editor.
Oh, wow, dude, don't be like that to yourself. You gotta show yourself more appreciation than that. We're millennials. Okay, let me explain what just happened. So I get an email this morning from some great listeners of the show who are like, hey, the latest episode only has your voice in it, which is not, if you're curious, that is not the best part of this show. So Andre has been scrambling to fix that, and there's going to be a bug. Well, obviously, by the time you listen to this, there's going to be a bug up, or a fix up, I should say. Hopefully not another bug. And there you go. So thank you. Andre is a one-man editing shop, by the way. So we record these episodes, and then he gets cracking on the editing. So the fact that this is the first time something like this has happened in a long time, I think is a hell of a statement, Andre, to your dedication to the craft.
With that being addressed, FYI, that's Jeremy speaking.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you know, you know. I'm Jeremy. I'm the co-founder of Gladstone AI national security company. Blah blah blah. Yeah, welcome to the show. I guess that was an unusual kickoff.
And real quick, before we do dive into news, and unusually light news week actually this week, so this might be a bit of a shorter episode. I do want to say I've been kind of mentioning the Apple reviews a bit and wanting to get to a nice round number of 200 ratings. We reached 201, so I crossed that threshold, and now it's not a round number anymore. But thank you to those who reviewed, and thanks for the feedback. Lightspeed226 has some good comments, enjoying the podcast, likes Jeremy explaining AI architecture and papers, where we get into the nitty-gritty of details, and I do think that's one of the nice things we enjoy doing. And did say prefer less geopolitical stuff with the US and China, which we will, take that into account. It's good to hear what people prefer. And this week, unlike most weeks, I don't think we have any geopolitical stuff. I
feel like there's one. There's one, if I recall. It's about China. Surprise, surprise.
There's always going to be one.
There's another review, which I find especially intriguing because it's from QQQQQQQQ star. So that's probably OpenAI's next model that is already running rampant, most likely an agent, I'm assuming, on the internet. It just says, I love this podcast. So there you go.
That's a good catch. I did not see that username, and that's pretty funny.
Can we say that this is an OpenAI endorsed podcast now? Is that what this allows us to say?
I mean, QStar, for context, if you don't know, it's a code name for a project at OpenAI that it's been kind of discussed for a long time. So apparently this user is probably just an AI chatbot, and AI officially endorses us now. Yeah. Alrighty, moving out to the news, starting with tools and apps. And the first story is a bit of a big deal. We have Grok 2 coming out in beta and with AI image generation. So Grok is the chatbot that you can access on X if you have X Premium and Premium Plus. This is the chatbot competitor to ChatGPT being developed by xAI and led by Elon Musk. And so this was announced in a blog post with not a ton of detail as to Grok 2. Essentially, all the blog post said is we have Grok 2 and Grok 2 Mini, and we beat a bunch of other models on the LLMs leaderboard, which was a bit of a surprise. It apparently did outperform Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4 Turbo, although I will note that is only if you include refusals. If you exclude things where a model says, I cannot answer, not quite the same news. And as to the image generation features, that's coming via Flux. So we covered this recently. There's Black Forest Labs, a startup coming out of the people who developed Stable Diffusion, has a really impressive model. Now everyone on X can use it. There are no restrictions, or very few restrictions, as I should say, what you can generate. And people have been generating some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, there is not a lot of detail in here, which is kind of odd, right? Because to a certain degree, like XAI's big differentiator and Twitter's big differentiator has been openness, open source and all that stuff. So, we're going to have to see how much openness there is around Grok 2. That certainly is a big part of the gripe that Elon has with OpenAI, right? About turning around on their sort of former commitment to openness, at least as many people interpreted it. One of the few things I was able to pick up from the blog post, based on their description, for what it's worth, it does look like they actually did use something like reinforcement learning from human feedback, maybe PPO, something like that, to fine-tune their models. They talk about getting these AI tutors to provide preference data by ranking outputs that they get for the model. Sounds an awful lot like the RLHF fine-tuning process. Maybe not surprising. I mean, it is pretty standard fare these days, but it is also interesting because Grok is supposed to be, more unhinged, less like fine-tuned to respond in certain ways. So at least we know there is in fact that step in the pipeline. Again, not shocking, but still kind of something you might have been wondering about given the whole kind of commitments around unshackling Grok and all that. We're also learning that an earlier version of Grok 2 was in fact, if you're knee deep in the kind of Twitterverse here, the Xverse, I should say, there was a lot of speculation about this model on the LMSys leaderboard that was posted under the name of sus column R. So we are now learning that in fact, an early version of Grok 2 was sus column R. So there you go. That's where we saw it outperforming Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4 Turbo with all the caveats, Andre, that you included. Again, it's like the differentiator of this model is that it will respond to any request, right? It's supposedly a lot less safety fine-tuned, a lot less inclined to decline to answer things. We're also seeing that obviously with the image generation feature. A lot of people commented on that. There's concern about the usual sort of misinformation concerns that you'll see people surface. In this context, especially interesting because there's absolutely no constraint, right, on what Black Forest Labs' Flux 1 model is actually being allowed to produce through the Grok interface. We've seen images circulate on social of like Donald Trump kissing Elon Musk and doing all kinds of stuff. So it's what you'd expect, basically. Some details about the enterprise release of Grok 2, which apparently is imminent. That's something that I thought was kind of interesting. X certainly leaning into the enterprise play, and there's a tighter and tighter integration with XAI and X, or what I'll say formerly Twitter and XAI. They're certainly seeming to work much more closely together. So really interesting to see both the capability of this model, some of the context around it, and also the fact that there is so little data available. We'll see if more comes online in the coming weeks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've gotten used to with these announcements from big companies to not include many details. But even relative to that, even relative to what we hear from OpenAI and DeepMind and so on, this had even less detail in the model. And I guess we are downplaying a little bit in our coverage. I think the big thing that media and most people have been paying attention to is the image generation. So Grok 2, I guess, from a technical perspective, from an AI progress perspective, is more interesting. And FYI, it does do well on benchmarks. So even aside from the leaderboard where humans rank models, and it might get a benefit from not refusing anything, the benchmark numbers are also pretty impressive. But yeah, as you said, the image generation, you end up having like Mickey Mouse smoking weed and drinking beer. You get like crazy things. You get like Mickey Mouse with a assault rifle and like people doing school shootings, these kinds of things. So, an interesting kind of bet that you will be able to get away with this, I think.
Yeah, and this. I mean, the Flux One model, and this may have been the podcast that you did with John a couple weeks ago when I wasn't there. So apologies if this is somewhat repetitive, but it is an impressive model, right? I mean, it apparently does surpass Midjourney and OpenAI's image generators in terms of the quality of the images, according to like basically an arena ranking, a kind of ELO based scoring. So it does seem legitimately to produce better outputs. And there's also apparently a text to video model coming soon. So we'll see if Flux One's text to video model ends up being incorporated into the into the formerly known as Twitter interface, because I think that'll be a whole other kettle of fish at that point.
That's right. And I will comment qualitatively, as you said, the model is impressive. Like when I was looking on Twitter and seeing these new images, I was pretty taken aback by the quality. And at first it was like, wow, did they actually train a model this good internally? But no, it was using an existing model from a very promising startup. So if nothing else, we're seeing some progress in image generation. And speaking of model updates with few details, the next story is OpenAI reveals an updated GPT-4o model, but can't explain how it's better. So that's kind of a gist of it. There was kind of a weird announcement from OpenAI on Twitter where they said, by the way, we've been serving a new improved ChatGPT variant since last week. But that was kind of all the details we got. And they updated the naming to ChatGPT 4o latest and have just said that it has bug fixes and performance improvements that users tend to prefer. So, hard to say. It seems like maybe OpenAI is trying to move a bit faster, trying to keep up with the news. And as we'll get into in the next story, Google is putting a bit of pressure on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were some early indications that something like this may have happened. Andre and I we were just talking before the show, before the recording at least, of about the kind of drama in the Twitterverse and the Xverse and how. Anyway, if you know, but there's this account called Pliny the Prompter, and he's been doing all kinds of stuff. But one of the things that he was pointing out last week was he noticed a difference between the OpenAI of like a week ago and the ChatGPT, the GPT-4o of like a week ago and the current one. So he was kind of early to the game here. And Pliny the Prompter, we've talked about him a little bit in the past. This is an account that does incredibly good jailbreaks of language models across the board, not just OpenAI's language models, but Anthropic's as well. So this is at least kind of noticeable to people who are really, really good at prompting strategy. And he certainly is a bit of a wizard on that stuff. So other than that, yeah, it just seems to be, it was the product of a lot of speculation. A lot of people were wondering, is this update the famous strawberry model? Which, of course, anyway, I'd be quite shocked if that were the case. It isn't at least a highly detectable upgrade, but certainly an iterative improvement.
Next up, that Google story, and it is that Google Gemini's voice chat mode is here. So Google just held an event for the Pixel 9, one of their smartphones, and as you've seen, they focused a lot on AI, and it seems that Gemini Live, that voice chat mode that is similar to the ChatGPT 4o demos. We had real-time conversational interactions with a chatbot with, very fast response times, very natural sounding voice from the AI. That is now coming to Gemini Advanced subscribers. And in addition to talking, it can also interpret video. Again, similar to what we've already seen with demos in the past, Google also showcased this a few months ago. in this in this release, you'll be able to choose between 10 Gemini voices, and currently it's only available in English for Android devices. So there you go. Google, in this case, we've seen some delays from OpenAI on expanding access to the voice mode. And of course, Apple, we've just covered, has delayed Apple Intelligence. So I'm sure, investors in Google are happy about this.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how it turns out, of course, one of the advantages of rolling it out first, as we've seen with OpenAI, is customers can generally be a bit more forgiving because you are the first time they're seeing this capability. And so when they see failure modes or when they see cases where it's being misused, they can kind of go, well, fair is fair. This is part of the sort of learning process, if you will. With Google, more established company, people probably will have less of that patience, but OpenAI as well is kind of maturing as well. So we'll see. But it has this interesting ask about this screen mode as well that they're advertising, or ask about this video. So it can give you information like pulling data from the screen that you're looking at, which is kind of interesting and another way of interacting with this model. They also say more languages besides English are incoming. So presumably that'll be soon. So we'll see if this leads to a wider release of voice mode at OpenAI in the coming days or weeks.
And out to the lightning round, just one more story related to Gemini. It is that in addition to that announcement of the voice chat, they also announced that Gemini is coming to the Pixel Buds Pro 2, their Bluetooth-enabled headphones, very similar to the Apple one. I forget what it's called. And so the idea here is you'll have access to Gemini to have that sort of conversational back and forth directly through the headphones. And I think this is mainly worth highlighting because we have been talking about all these different hardware releases like the Humane AI Pin, the Rabbit R1, things that come out and promise to deliver AI via hardware device and epically failed. This to me is kind of that idea, right? Of this plays music, but also you can chat to an AI in real time as a hardware device. And if anything has a chance to succeed, I would imagine something like this would make sense.
It's true. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's part not only of a long line of kind of disappointing releases on the hardware side, Humane's AI Pin, Rabbit R1, we've talked about both of those, but also specifically with Google, they going back to Google Glass have had a rough time with some of these releases. I think, at this point, this is just a tough nut to crack, but whoever does, maybe there's an iPhone moment there. I'm sure there is at least one iPhone product worth of stuff in this space by now. So, we'll have to see. It's interesting when you look at it, kind of looks like if you've ever had an AirTag, if you imagine an AirTag that's like half the size that sits right inside your ear, that you can kind of see, it's like a little, if you get a white one, at least this little AirTag like thing. So it's fairly discreet, but it is going to be something to get used to as people start to talk to themselves in this way, or rather talk to AI systems in this way. They do say they have a new chip that's made it possible to reduce the size of these buds by, they say, 27%, with faster processing speeds and as well a battery life increase to apparently 12 hours. And then that's on the buds. And then when you combine it with the charging case that comes with it, 48 hours as well. So a lot of focus on the hardware side, edge device deployments. The overall thing will set you back $229, and they start shipping September 26th. Hashtag very much not an ad. We have no idea how this is going to turn out. And but the marketing around this too. We've seen this with another kind of set of releases in this space. Is they'll talk about it like, oh, this is like an intimate companion or a close confidant in this case. It's interesting. I'm curious how that's going to resonate with different demographics. You could see that being a little bit creepy as a thing to introduce, but I mean, I think, talking to my friends in San Francisco, Andre, I'm sure it's the same for you. People are a lot more open to this kind of thing and easing into a Her style movie ever so slightly every day.
Yeah, I would imagine if there's an audience to try this with, it would be people who have the Pixel, flagship phone and can buy $230 headphones.
That's a good point.
And now one more story on Google, not on that event. This one is about their AI generated search summaries and that getting a small update. So they are expanding them to 6 new countries and also changing the way that citations are shown. So before they were included in the text of the little summary you get that answers your question with sort of a chatbot generated summary of different sources, websites that it can have access to. So it was kind of not easy to see those links necessarily before. Now they're making that much more prominent, like to the right of the text you see. And this article does say that early testing of a feature is indicating higher traffic to publisher sites, which I'm sure publishers will be happy with.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because we talked about this earlier in the context of Search GPT, that when you read the description of this new take on search summaries, it sounds quite similar, right? You had that tab with the kind of websites that are being referenced, and then you have the main thing with the AI generated explanation. So at the time, we talked about how this is some kind of fundamental shift away from just the user interface look. The design of traditional search is going to happen. You're going to have to change the search experience in a fundamental way if you're going to take on Google, because that product really does seem so optimized, right? Bing didn't have much success out the gate trying to compete with Google, trying to take away market share, even when they integrated GPT-4. And so, yeah, you need to do something significant to rattle the cage. This is Google seemingly, jumping on what OpenAI is doing with Search GPT and saying, nah, we're going to cover this base as well. It'll be interesting to see. There are a couple of kind of unique aspects of generative AI-based search that are clearly leading to different product thinking in this case. So in particular, there's this whole idea that they want to make it easy to save an AI overview that's generated. Now, there's no notion of saving a traditional Google search, right? You do a search, you get the thing, and then it's not like you want to save that list of links. Well, in this case, because we're using generative AI, you get actual content. So, saving becomes a thing that's more relevant. There are a whole bunch of different, and there's also a button they're setting up that allows you to simplify AI overviews. So if you get a response that's like more complicated, they're allowing you to just hit a button, get a more simple version of that response back. So all of these are really interesting user experience experiments that we're seeing play out right now in real time as people just try to figure out what is the right user experience for this category of product. So we'll see. There's been a launch, obviously, of AI overviews in the US. That was back in May. Of course, we'll know that fondly or remember it fondly because of the rough start it got off to, where we found it telling users to put glue on pizza to help the cheese stick and eat rocks and all that stuff that we talked about at the time. But now we're seeing a wider release to the UK, India, Japan, and Indonesia, Mexico, and Brazil. So this is a wider rollout in addition to all these new features.
And now one more story going to Anthropic now. Prompt caching is now available on the Anthropic API. So caching is something I think we've mentioned once before. The idea is that if you use the same introduction to your context, you have some sort of instructions that you reuse all the time as you use Claude. Well, now you will be able to cache that and reuse it, meaning that it'll be cheaper and faster. So when you do write to the cache, there's going to be increased input token cost, but then you'll be able to benefit from that and have pretty significant cost efficiency and processing speed improvements. So, probably not too exciting for the usual users, but for AI developers, I think this is definitely a pretty significant feature. And I'm kind of surprised that Anthropic was the first one relative to others like OpenAI, notably, who released this feature.
Hey, but haven't we been saying stuff like that quite a few times lately? That's kind of an interesting turnaround. Yeah, apparently. So I think that this is a very significant result for developers. It is, as you said, it's a bit more expensive. So it costs 25% more than the base input token price if you're going to actually write to the cache. So just 25% more. But then when you're using that cached content, it costs only 10% of the base input price. In other words, you get 90% off basically whatever chunk of text you'd previously cached relative to if you loaded it all up again every time you were calling the API to try to get it to use that context. A bunch of use cases that this could help with, right? Anytime you have a really, really big prompt that you're going to reuse, say, if you're working with a code base, you got a big code base, you want to make updates or changes, you don't want to be reloading that whole code base every time when you're doing a Q&A session to kind of debug it or ask questions about how to extend it. So that's a really big deal. And again, that's 90% off per query after the first query is a big, big deal, especially when you think about agentic models. That's the kind of context where you would be working with those big code bases. Cases where you want to include a whole bunch of examples in your prompt, or just really long, pieces of documents, pieces of work like books and papers, stuff like that. Unclear, by the way, how exactly this is working. That was something that I've been thinking about a fair bit. I mean, I think there's probably a lot going on here, but you could imagine that the long prompts that are fed in are maybe segmented into parts that can be reused. So if you got a large document, it could be broken down into sections or paragraphs or sentences that can be individually cached and reused just for that added efficiency. Probably pre-computed embeddings is really the way to go here. So, you could imagine, especially looking at the pricing model, it does suggest, given that initial lift, that writing to the cache is more expensive than reading from it. And if that's the case, you're probably looking at a case where there's initial kind of compute cost associated with generating those pre-computed embeddings. So, I would imagine that's all part of this, but we don't have any kind of technical details beyond that. So we'll just have to see if they release it. But wow, what an upgrade! Costs are down by 90%. They say latency it drops by up to 85% for long prompts. So basically, you're getting your outputs, like 90% cheaper and 85% faster. In fairness, in a best case scenario for these long prompts. So really impressive next step here for Anthropic.
Now moving on to applications and business. And the first story is a bit of a reiteration. As you said, we did cover Black Forest Labs before, but given the news of XAI, it seems worth to cover this next article. And it is Meet Black Forest Labs, the startup powering Elon Musk's unhinged AI image generator. So as per the title, this is giving a sort of overview of the startup. So Black Forest Labs is based in Germany. It emerged with 31 million in seed funding by super big names in the VC industry. And they did announce those Flux One models pretty recently and released the smaller variant of those models. And now I'm sure they are raking in a lot of money from this partnership of XAI. They do say they plan to open source more, as with Stable Diffusion and Stability AI used to do regularly. And as you said, they do say that they're working on a text-to-video model. And this is pretty significant because we've seen a fair amount of work on text-to-video models, but no one has really matched Sora still. Sora that we've seen the preview of going back to January, at least in commercial settings, you have very significant progress with companies like Runway and Luma showcasing a lot of stuff, but no one quite hitting that mark. And I could see this company actually managing to at least try and do that.
Yeah, and with all the caveats, of course, that have to apply to the fact that we're not exactly sure what the capabilities of Sora are, and you hear stuff back and forth from people who've had to work with it, but certainly it does seem like they are ahead of the game. The investors here, you're right. I mean, these are big names. So, and they all have a certain kind of orientation in this space. So Andreessen Horowitz, they led the round, $31 million seed funding round, by the way, which, so if you're not familiar with the kind of this traditional VC circuit, usually if you go to raise a seed round, you're raising like anywhere from 1 to, I don't know, 5 million these days. I mean, that's kind of where things have gone. So a $31 million seed funding round, that's what you would normally associate with kind of a low mid-sized Series A these days. I mean, that's a big round. A seed is significant because it means they're giving away no board control. At least that's typically what would happen. It's only in Series A and beyond priced rounds that you tend to see actual board seats getting given away. So this means that they had quite a bit of leverage going in. And of course, you're seeing amazing investors like Andreessen, but also Gary Tan. Gary Tan, CEO of Y Combinator, who has come out recently as sort of in this accelerationist camp and all that, and been very sort of bombastic in his support of AI accelerationism and sort of being against a lot of guardrails and talk of that sort of thing. Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz, same things. That's sort of the orientation, certainly of this company. And we see that mirrored as well in the partnership with X, right, where they're generating these images that have relatively few guardrails. I mean, there are going to be some on there, but you're presumably not going to see this thing generate certain kinds of pornographic imagery, let's say. But generally, they're trying to reduce the kind of the number and extent of safety guardrails. So yeah, really interesting. Founders, former researchers at Stability AI. You mentioned that, Andre, earlier. So they definitely have a pedigree. And there's a lot of much ado in this article about the misinformation dimensions of this, and everything you'd expect, quoting people saying, "Hey, this is really bad. We're getting all this misinformation is going to flood on Twitter, on X." I mean, at a certain point with open source image generators, I think this was all kind of baked in. Maybe this advances that timeline by like 6 months, maybe a year, but it's not a fundamentally different trajectory from the one that we'd been on. So you could see those arguments really go either way.
Right. Yeah, I think if I were to comment on the misinformation piece, as you said, I don't think this really changes the game that much. Maybe it makes it easier to spread it because you can generate stuff on XAI and then spread it on X right away. But mostly what people have been doing is making ridiculous, funny, outrageous things, including things like Trump and I think Joe Biden kissing, like crazy, ridiculous.
No, that
happened.
Like did you not? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's big news. Wow.
It was a wild press conference.
And I will say, interesting for me to think about this being based in Germany, given the progress of the EU AI Act, which does have, things related to risks, things related to misinformation. And so this company will be very much enforced and have to comply with those regulations. And, maybe harder to be kind of this freewheeling with your model once the act goes into effect, and it is going into effect in a sort of rolling basis going into 2025 and 2026. And next up, a story about hardware in China. We'll see if we can not comment on geopolitics. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, that's going to be easy as hell. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the story is that Huawei readies new AI chip to challenge NVIDIA in China, according to WSJ. So this is the Ascend 910C, and it is being tested in some Chinese companies. And the claim is that it is comparable to NVIDIA's H100 chip. So the really flagship, the top of the line of what you can get. Currently in China, NVIDIA can only sell sort of a weaker variant of the H100, the H20. And so we've covered how people have tried to smuggle chips into China. Like, this restriction is a big deal. And so if Huawei does manage to produce a chip that's comparable, this chip, if it is in fact an H100 level chip, that would be a pretty big deal.
It would be. It would also create a big challenge for NVIDIA, right? So one of the games, I'm sorry, Lightspeed something, the commenter who didn't want geopolitics. I'm going to dip into it just for a minute here. So, one of the big challenges for NVIDIA has been, because of U.S. export control restrictions, they've not been allowed to ship to China their, H100, H200, and then now B200 chips that are coming online. And so they've had to pare them down, basically, and create these basically these chips where they'll take the original chip and then they'll zap a bunch of circuits to decrease the capabilities, and they'll send them over to China. That's usually how this works. The Chinese variant of the B200 is known as the B20, the same as the H200, that was the H20, and so on. So these chips, these made for China chips that NVIDIA is exporting, have seen actually recently a rising market share as people have seen that they compare favorably to, for example, the 910B, the kind of latest Huawei chip before the 910C, which is the kind of next generation that we're talking about here. And so this is really eroding NVIDIA's market share. If it's the case that the Huawei 910C is actually on par with the H100, which would surprise me a little bit. But if that turns out to be the case, then the NVIDIA's B20 is completely outclassed. And you're going to see NVIDIA really struggle in China. And I think quite quickly, basically as quickly as these new Huawei chips can come online to compete with them. So then it becomes really relevant. Okay, how fast can Huawei ramp production? The expectation apparently is that they could produce over 1 million chips next year if they don't face additional restrictions from the US. That's a big if. The Department of Commerce is looking very closely at this space. They've explicitly told NVIDIA in the past, hey, stop messing around with your chip thresholds to just sneak by our export control restrictions to keep exporting powerful chips to China. We will crack down on you. They are looking at this space very, very closely. And so, I would expect them to come down pretty hard on whatever gaps remain. Now, one of the key gaps here is if you're Huawei, you do still depend, as hard as you're trying to free yourself of Western technology, you do still depend on a couple of key inputs from Western sources. One is we talk a lot about the photolithography machines. Those come from the Netherlands. Sure, that's one thing. But another is high bandwidth memory. The best high bandwidth memory in the world typically gets made in Korea. There's a company called SK Hynix. And, to the extent that Huawei still needs those chips, they are vulnerable to the US stepping in and saying, hey, we're going to extend our export controls to cover SK Hynix. If that happens, Huawei is going to be in trouble. So we've seen Huawei in response stockpiling these high bandwidth memory chips like crazy in anticipation, basically, to this risk of US curbs coming in to prevent them from taking those on. So the high bandwidth memory, super, super important, especially when you're talking about scaled training runs. You need to be able to move huge amounts of data back and forth between your logic, your compute, and your storage, all that stuff, and your chips generally. So this is a really, really big deal if they can achieve this level of domestic production, no question, but it is still subject to various interventions that the US government could make. And I would expect if you see this chip come out and you see it shipping at decent volumes, apparently Huawei is going to start shipping as soon as October. That's the claim. You may well see those, the US government coming in and clamping down harder. That, it's hard to tell, but the thing to look at here is going to be basically yields, like how efficiently can they actually make these chips? Because that's been an issue for Huawei in the past. And scale, how quickly can they ramp up? Can they meaningfully compete, for example, with NVIDIA and squeeze them out of the Chinese market?
There you go. You can fill out geopolitics on your Last Week in AI bingo card. We'll see if we get some OpenAI drama next and some LLM scaling research. I know. And onto the lightning round, and the next story also related to hardware and chip manufacturing, and it is that ASML and Imec announced high-NA lithography breakthrough. So currently, you are using EUV tools for the production of the cutting edge, very low nanometer. I think it's 2 nanometer scale chips that are needed for the most advanced smartphones and also increasingly for the most advanced GPUs to run AI on. And so high-NA is the kind of next step, the next most significant technology where you will try and continue scaling down. And so they have announced this breakthrough progress on making that happen. This is pretty significant because they are already kind of in talks to release these. Intel is reportedly buying all of these machines for 2024. And the machines, by the way, cost $400 million each. And so Intel is buying these and plans to put them in production in 2026.
Yeah, the high NA is a really interesting space, and one day when we do a hardware episode, we will discuss this in detail. But one of the key things with this tech is, so if you want to, so I have a background in optics back in the day, and one of the first things that you learn when you do optics is that if you want to focus light really, really tightly, you're going to need a very short wavelength of light. Now, short wavelength of light means high energy. If you're going to do that, though, it turns out you need a really big lens. So there's this sort of combination of things that comes along with if you want to decrease the wavelength of your light that allows you to etch these really, really small features, you need much, much bigger lenses. And those basically F up the traditional lithography machine setups. If you start to increase the size of your lenses, pretty soon things stop fitting in places. And by the way, a high numerical aperture lens is basically just a large lens. That's kind of what this is getting at. So essentially, this is the game of like, how do we work with this very, very short wavelength, high energy light? Another challenge that comes up there is mirrors. If you want to get good reflection, so a lot of light gets lost every time you hit a mirror, especially at high energy. It's really hard to get good mirrors for that. So that's another challenge. They're making all these custom mirrors for exactly this. Apparently here, so they achieved first light, as they put it, a few months ago, back in April, and they've now successfully printed a bunch of logic patterns using this machine. So they're kind of showing proof of principle. This actually, this has wings. They think that what they can do is, so I'm just going to, one more little thing here, because it is really significant. The fact of having this very high intensity light, this very bright, high energy light, short wavelength, it also means that you can shine your light just once on a chip and get the pattern to take. Often, especially when you're trying to etch really, kind of put in really subtle patterns on your chip, what you have to do is pass over the chip multiple times, right? That's called multiple exposure, or multi-patterning. And that the issue with that is it's slow. You got to go over the same chip many times, which means you can't ship as many chips, which means each chip is more expensive. And so the exciting thing about high numerical aperture lithography is maybe you'll be able to do a single exposure, ship it, single exposure, ship it, even at these very, very small resolutions, at, in this case, 1.4 nanometer production. That's what Intel believes. So Intel's going all in on it. Like you said, they bought literally every single one of ASML's high numerical aperture lithography machines for 2024, way, way ahead of everybody else. There is a risk in doing that, though, that they're a little too early. The technology is not quite mature enough. TSMC certainly believes that. They're holding off on adopting high numerical aperture lithography for now because they feel like, hey, we can hit those resolutions by doing multi-patterning. There's a complex economic argument there. Again, for a hardware episode, it would be great to get into it, but you actually can math it out, and it's actually not clear, where's that boundary? Is it, is 1.4 nanometers where you start to get payoff from high numerical aperture and all that stuff? It's unclear, but this is the all-in play for Intel, and they have to do something like this because they're so far behind. If this works, that's a big win. Samsung, by the way, also expected to move into high numerical aperture lithography. They have a history of being early to need with some of this technology in the past too. They've been burnt before, so we'll see if that plays out again here. But the space is rapidly evolving, and this is going to be a big, big deal for the chip production runs of the sort of mid-late 2020s.
We'll have to try and do that hardware episode before your baby arrives, I think, because otherwise we'll never do it. So.
Well, the hardware story will just change. Who knows? Yeah,
that's true. Next up, Chinese startup WeRide gets nod to test robotaxis with passengers in California. So there you go. The California Public Utilities Commission is allowing this Chinese company to test in San Jose in nearby areas. It was founded in 2017, and they are already testing in 30 cities across 7 countries, and is the only company to have self-driving test licenses in China, the US, the UAE, and Singapore, and all of those. And that is coming as WeRide is planning to have a US IPO. So that's pretty significant. They're going to try and raise hundreds of millions of dollars from that public offering. And no doubt something like this will raise their initial cost. So, we keep or I keep mentioning that robotaxis are kind of the quiet undercurrent of this year in AI, and they're starting to really hit the public. And this is another indicator of that.
It's funny. You can always tell which stories are Andre stories and which stories are Jeremy stories. the robotaxi stories, a lot of the image stories, the gaming stories. I think we get good coverage. This is. I'm intrigued. I mean, this is also an interesting. Anytime you get into robotaxis and that sort of thing, you do like. For people who don't want to hear the national security stuff, I'm sorry. It's hard not to think of that because people tend to talk a lot in cars. And so, kind of interesting to the extent that you're seeing a rollout of this sort of thing in the US. There are some national security implications, this sort of thing. But in any case, you're right. This is coming for us fast, and very soon it won't just be Waymo.
That's right. And I guess for the context, Waymo has been trying to expand into LA and I think eventually New York. And someone did issue a nice correction on YouTube that Waymo has had license to test on highways. They've been kind of holding off on doing that and starting to test only with its own workers. So I think we kind of slightly misspoke on that front, but
misinformation on Last Week in AI.
Even we are doing it. Special form of AI misinformation, not what people worry about. It's really the people commenting on AI that are doing most of the misinformation, as we've seen on Twitter.
Yeah, misinformation about AI.
And next story is that Perplexity's popularity surges as AI search startup takes on Google. So we've discussed Perplexity quite a bit. This is the big player that allows you to do this sort of AI-enabled search where you enter a query, it looks up a bunch of websites, and then generates a chatbot response for you that synthesizes all that information. And this article is gathering some new information around the statistics of this company. They say that they answered 250 million questions in the past month, and that's compared to 500 million for the entirety of the last year. At the beginning of this year, they had 5 million in annualized revenues, and now they're making 35 million, according to a company insider for this article. And so, that does indicate pretty healthy growth. And we've seen companies in the AI space struggle with that commercialization piece, with that ability to actually have a good business model. This article also mentions that Perplexity is looking to get into the ads business in addition to their premium subscriber tier of $20 a month. So Perplexity is seemingly going to stick around, and we'll see if Google AI overviews and Search GPT will be a big problem for them.
Yeah, this is a really interesting fundraise. So, we're seeing a valuation triple from $1 billion that was back in April to $3 billion now. The investors include SoftBank, right? The Vision 2 fund, or the Vision Fund 2, is now joining in. That's a big deal. They're known for making investments at scale, kind of roughly in this ballpark, and not bad, not half bad. One thing to note: I was surprised by this. I didn't realize the scale of Perplexity's success so far. So when they talk about hitting 250 million queries or questions last month, right? So when you do the math, that's actually about 1,000 times less than Google. So they're basically dealing with 1,000x fewer queries than Google on a monthly basis and on a daily basis, I presume. So first of all, that's an impressive number. I know it may sound like a lot, 1,000 times less. That is an impressive number, especially they had to start from scratch. Nobody knows what they are. Google's a household name. Perplexity is already 1 in 1,000 of these searches. The other thing is that a search on Perplexity is a very different beast from a search on Google, right? These are much more interesting, sometimes high intentionality searches. They're much more kind of interactive and imply a higher level of buy-in to the platform in many cases. So this is actually quite an interesting sign. If I were Google, I would be looking very, very closely at this as an early an early warning that something interesting is happening here. You don't want to take your eye off that. There are a bunch of interesting notes here coming from Perplexity's CEO, quoted in the article, where he's kind of sharing his thinking on the strategic picture here. He's saying basically, look, Google's distracted by trying to manage a million different products. OpenAI, he says, is too. Unlike OpenAI, he says, we always knew our main monetization engine was going to be advertising. They knew they were going to pivot into this. And in my estimation, like what they've done here is brilliant strategy. Start off with a sort of paid model while you have low traffic, $20 a user. That's a great way to go. Then pivot into advertising at scale. That's really the way you do this. They say they're going to split a double-digit percentage of their revenues on every sponsored article with news publishers whose articles are cited. That's kind of interesting. Again, that's a kind of new business model approach that we haven't seen before. Of course, they've got deals signed with Time, Fortune, Der Spiegel, a bunch of other publications that we've talked about in the past. And as you might expect, a fundraise like this, the sense that the platform is gaining traction, the sense that, hey, maybe if you can't beat him, join him, is leading other publishers to ask to join their the revenue sharing program. Apparently got 50 people in the 2 weeks since their launch who've come on and said they want to join that. So this is really, they're framing this as an attempt to align incentives with journalism for the long term, revenue sharing, instead of doing this kind of one-time lump sum payment, which is what OpenAI has been doing, of course, when they sign these deals with Time Magazine, with other outlets like that. They're saying, hey, here's a flat, big chunk of money. Now we get to use your stuff to train our models, right? That's kind of the play here. So, it's an interesting time to be in the search space for sure. Search GPT is as well, but Perplexity, like these numbers just look very, very interesting. So we'll see if it continues to grow. But $35 million in ARR, in annual recurring revenue, is pretty damn solid. It sounds absurd, by the way, when you look at that multiple, right? They're making $35 million recurring a year, and they got a $3 billion valuation, right? That's a 100-fold increase. Like they're being valued 100 times higher than their revenue. Normally, the lift is not that big. In this instance, it really is because the growth is there and the market is so big, and this is just such a scalable business that if it works, you really are looking at something that competes with Google. So anyway, fascinating company. I think a really interesting space to be tracking in general, and we will be talking about Perplexity more.
According to Google, Bing gets 900 million searches per month. So there you go. It's a pretty big chunk Perplexity of other, let's say, competitors to Google. And the last story for the section is again about hardware, but this time it is about hardware, finances and companies. So Lisa Su, who is the leader at AMD, welcomes Silo AI team after completing the $665 million acquisition. So we may have already covered the announcement of this, but now it is finished. And so to reiterate, Silo AI is focused on delivering LLMs for large enterprise customers, and AMD is now going to use them to deliver end-to-end AI solutions based on open standards. And to me, this is a little bit interesting because we've talked a lot about how AMD competes with NVIDIA on the hardware. NVIDIA is, to my knowledge, less kind of active in the space of end-to-end solutions and in the space of providing LLMs to enterprise customers. And AMD seems to be maybe going more in that direction with this work.
Yeah, no, I think your read is exactly right. Like we've seen NVIDIA put out research papers, right, and very impressive kind of academic results, and to some degree, like product things. That Microsoft Turing NLG work was really interesting. That was a collaboration with Microsoft, but it did lead to a product. But you don't tend to see them make their own things and host them. They tend to partner with other groups, and you can see why, right? NVIDIA, if you're a hardware company, you must have relationships with model developers so that you can co-evolve your hardware in tandem with those model advances. That's something that's, I think, very under-recognized in the space. the tight-knit nature of the interaction between the hardware developers and the model developers. So this, if for no other reason, this acquisition would make sense. But if Silo AI is then going to be, developing models for NVIDIA to then deploy to its end use customers, its enterprise customers, then that would be a different axis that it could differentiate itself from NVIDIA on. So yeah, we'll see. But it's not a terribly small acquisition either, $665 million, especially for for AMD rather, because they're not NVIDIA. That's a decent amount of money. They've spent apparently $125 million acquiring other AI startups, including Not AI, actually, in the last couple of months. So there you have it.
Yeah, decent amount of money, $665 million. I think that's
I would take it.
And onto projects and open source. And we do have a pretty notable open source story this week. We have the release of FalconMamba 7B. So the claim here is that this is the world's first attention-free AI model. And this was trained on a ton of data, let's just say a very big number, and does have that 7 billion parameter number coming from the Technology Innovation Institute at Abu Dhabi, who previously have released Falcon, one of the early big models to be open sourced with very permissive licensing. So this is pretty significant because we've covered a lot of research about Mamba being an alternative approach for doing large models instead of kind of the techniques used in things like ChatGPT, where you use kind of expensive attention. Viz, just in a gist, uses a different thing that is maybe harder to scale up, harder perhaps to get good performance on, but has better characteristics in terms of being able to deal with long inputs, generate long outputs, and have that scaling capacity. So this is a big deal because of that. We haven't seen these Mamba type models scaled up to this level, and it does appear that this is, a pretty highly trained model and is being released on Hugging Face for anyone to use.
And to your point about the memory constraints, 7 billion parameters, there's a reason we're not seeing, these models trained at the higher levels of scale that we otherwise might. But this is interesting. So a couple of things here, right? So first off, this model can process sequences with arbitrary length without any increase in memory storage. And that's one of the consequences of the Mamba architecture. You can think of it as having this like finite chunk of memory that it's going to hold on to. And into that memory, you're going to gradually load more and more of your understanding. If you're the model, you're going to gradually tweak that memory. You only have that memory you can play with, but the numbers in that memory register, you're going to, or it's not register, but anyway, in that sort of window of memory, you're going to tweak those numbers as you read more text, and then just basically look back at that memory register to kind of decode and predict the next token. So because of that, no matter how much text you read, it's always going to take you the same amount of compute, the same amount of time to generate a new token, because you're doing the same thing, looking back to this fixed amount of memory and like processing it basically to generate your output. So that's a really interesting kind of value added these architectures. The challenge is that because you're dealing with that finite memory size, the more you read, the more you tend to forget. And so you tend to see that pop up in evals of these kind of Mamba models where, sure, they theoretically on paper have an infinite context window, which is how they put it in this paper. They'll say, oh, we have an infinite context window. But do they really? Like, what ends up happening is you're sort of treadmilling out a lot of knowledge that you're loading in. And there are all kinds of strategies used to kind of triage and determine what new information is worthy of bumping out old information previously stored in that memory register. But that's the kind of game you have to get into. You got to get into triaging how you're using that memory. So in any case, this is an interesting experiment in that direction. There's all kinds of stuff that they include about how they train it. They did have some high quality curated data that they added in towards the end of training. Not too unusual. But yeah, anyway, it's interesting. It's also notable that it's coming out of the Technology Innovation Institute, TII, which is in Abu Dhabi. they've been really, I mean, they came out with Falcon and Falcon 2 back in the day. At the time, Falcon, right, was like the number one open source model for, I want to say, a couple weeks. And now we have, the new kind of FalconMamba version of this. But strategically interesting, the UAE is clearly making AI a big priority. So we'll see if they keep pumping stuff out that's interesting. This thing does fit, by the way, on a single A10, not A100, a single A10 GPU, 24 gigabyte GPU, which is, well, I guess not that shocking. I mean, it is a 7 billion parameter model. So there you go. But the fact that you have an infinite context window in principle, it's kind of nice to have. It's a good addition to the canon of 7 billion parameter models.
Next project by OpenAI, they have introduced SWE-bench Verified. So SWE-bench is a benchmark dealing with software engineering, one of the ones that typically gets reported when you announce a new model. And so apparently the benchmark has some issues. It seems that there are some problems with the problem descriptions and the unit tests in evaluations. And so that might have led to underestimating AI performance when you run this benchmark. So what this one is just a subset. It's the verified components of the original test set. It's down to 500 samples that were reviewed by, quote, professional software developers. And so this presumably will be the new kind of standard for benchmarking on these kinds of things. And apparently GPT-4o got a score of 33% on this new benchmark compared to 16% on the original benchmark.
Yeah, and that's not a small problem, right? I mean, so as OpenAI puts it in the blog post, their preparedness framework explicitly looks at software development capability as an indicator, and I think this is correct, as an indicator of risk of loss of control and autonomy, autonomy risk, broadly understood. So, when you have all of a sudden a benchmark that literally doubles your reported performance when you fix it, when you get rid of problems in that benchmark, like that is a really big deal. The fact that OpenAI is so focused on this data set is also interesting. I think that tells us something about where the next movement is that they expect to see in terms of their preparedness framework. What are some of the maybe indicators and warnings that they're most interested in these days? The problems with the benchmark were not small, by the way. It's not like they were nitpicking here and there. Like if you look at the data, it's like, wow, a lot of these things had serious issues. About like almost 40% of the samples in the benchmark were apparently flagged for underspecified problem statements, basically where you couldn't really figure out what the right solution was. And over half, 61%, were flagged for unit tests that may unfairly mark valid solutions as incorrect. So we've looked at MMLU, for example, is a very sort of leaky and challenged benchmark for similar reasons. This is another big one. This is really, a big issue. It doesn't mean that you can't do to some degree apples to apples and look at how models have improved on this benchmark in the past with the understanding that it is flawed. But certainly this makes a big difference. So they hired apparently 93 software developers to manually go through these samples for quality and did a bunch of annotations and stuff like that, and ended up, as you say, lifting by a factor of 2 GPT-4o's performance on this. One other interesting finding. So there are a lot of different ways that you can take a language model, right, like GPT-4, and turn it into an agent. Right, a lot of different, they're called scaffolds, but basically these are like software frameworks that sort of go around that frame up the model and turn it into an agent. And what they find is you see huge variation in the success rates on this benchmark of different agents depending on which scaffold you use. So for example, it goes all the way from, with really simple RAG-based scaffolds, from 2.7% score on this benchmark to 28.3 with the best performing scaffold, Code R. So what does that tell us? It tells us that sure, you can have an impressive looking model, but you actually don't know what the capabilities of that model are unless and until you pair it with a specific scaffold. So you may actually be surprised at the capability that is revealed in your model. You may have thought it had a certain safety profile, a certain risk profile, and then be kind of rattled and shocked when you see, oh my God, we just tweaked in some often subtle ways the framework, the scaffold that we're using to make this an agentic model, and all of a sudden it can do all these ridiculously dangerous things. I mean, going from 3% to 30%, which is what we're seeing here, basically, is a really, really big deal as well. So there are a lot of axes along which this is a really interesting result. I mean, I would expect to see a lot more on the software development side coming from OpenAI, more models with more software capabilities. That's why they're so interested in investing so heavily in making sure these benchmarks are working properly.
On to the lightning round. The first story is about Hermes Free from Nous Research. And this is taking an LLM and fine-tuning it for better capabilities across a range of things. So across long-term context retention, multi-turn conversation capability, role-playing, tool use, agentic function calling, all of this kind of stuff. And they did release a paper on it where they go into the focus on extended capabilities. So in addition to the helpful assistant kind of things you get with ChatGPT, they say that they have a bunch of kind of the cutting edge things like having a scratch pad, reasoning, inner monologue, planning, stuff like that. And they trained it on things that were meant to improve it on these kinds of things. So they go into the data mixture, and they have a lot of things on math, role-playing, coding, tool use, stuff like that. And this is the kind of thing you see. I guess this is one example of people taking release models like Llama and then improving them in pretty significant ways. And that's what you can get from open source. So pretty cool new model here.
Yeah, and Hermes is interesting, Hermes, yes, but also, so Nous Research is interesting as well. They have this sort of philosophical commitment to having, as they put it, neutral models that don't follow let me just read this to you. It reads like something out of a manifesto. They say large language models have very limited direct agency. Rather, it is the systems and applications that we as humans build them with that give them any degree of agency to the outside world. We believe that a more appropriate place for guardrails and active intervention is at the larger system levels rather than on the models themselves, which can result in an a priori lobotomization of potential lines of thinking. It's a very wordy sort of paper, but one of the things they're getting at is they're saying we want to basically have a model that is not safety fine-tuned. It's actually not unlike the Grok picture, right? We want something that's, as they put it, our training data strongly encourages the model to follow the system and instruction prompts exactly and neutrally. This distinguishes Hermes from popular closed-weight commercial models, which may refuse instructions on moral grounds. So that's, again, you're sort of in that same X orbit. Anyway, I kind of find it interesting. There's another company popping up, sort of claiming to do the same thing. One of the really interesting results, and there was some drama on Twitter, or I should say on X, about this earlier this morning. People were looking at this result, and apparently, as they put it, the model sometimes displays anomalous behavior. So if you give it a blank system prompt, basically, so the system prompt is a thing. It's like a meta instruction that tells the system kind of how to role play, like what type of helpful chatbot should you be. If you don't put anything in the system prompt and you just ask the model, who are you? It goes off into this sort of diatribe of existential rant, basically. And this is not dissimilar from the sort of rent mode that Ed and I talked about on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast a little while ago. But it is actually, the manifestation looks the same. It's actually fundamentally different. And this one I think is a lot more innocuous. So they're reading into this in their paper like, oh, this is like AI consciousness or whatever. What seems to have actually happened is that the model interprets a blank system prompt as a cue that it's supposed to pretend to have amnesia. And so when you look at the actual response that it gives, when you write, "Who are you?" it writes, looks around confused. "I don't know who I am. Where am I? What's going on? I can't remember anything at all." Puts hands to head, looking distressed. "My mind feels completely blank." I don't know why I'm starting to sound like Robin Williams there. "I have no idea what's happening right now or how I got here. Do you know me?" I don't. Anyway, it's that kind of shit, right? So the reality of this, it seems, when some people did some more prompting on it, was they did find there's surfaced this idea of a blank system prompt being that cue. There's a bunch of data around this that does raise some questions, but I don't think it's as simple. By the way, this phenomenon gets worse as you scale the model. That's consistent with what we heard from our friends at the Frontier Labs, who said that rent mode, this sort of existential musing mode, that's really difficult apparently to stamp out of many frontier models. Not all, but many frontier models at scale. It gets worse with scale too. This, again, does seem to be a different story. It seems more like the emergent behavior here is, as you scale the model more, it gets clever at recognizing an empty system prompt as a cue that it should behave as if it has amnesia. So I think this is not quite a whole lot of nothing, but the initial response from this company, oh geez, what are they called? Not Hermes. I keep wanting Nous Research. To me, you could take different points of view on this for sure, but to me was not maybe quite calibrated to the actual reality. But interesting that they're surfacing this, and certainly useful to have more data.
Yeah, that's a good call out on this being tied to a manifesto. As you said, they do want to make uncensored, or they say individually aligned models. And if you read the blog post, it finishes with, "What do we plan to do now? To walk the path, experiment and push the boundaries of individual alignment, artificial consciousness, and open source software in ways that monolithic companies and governments are too afraid to try." So there you go.
And this summer, Nous Research presents. Sorry, yeah, it's but it's interesting, right? Like the cool thing about the space is you do see so much diversity of thought in terms of what should be done. Different question about the risks that come with it, but yeah, it like I don't know. I like the attitude, but damn, I think these unhinged models, we may be baking in some stuff that we might regret in time.
And just one more story. It is a new supercomputer network could lead to AGI, with first node coming online within weeks. This is covering this organization SingularityNet, which has been around for a while, and they are saying that they will have a supercomputer coming online in September, and their whole plan is to train artificial general intelligence with a network of supercomputers. I'm not sure if they still do this. When they launched, they had this whole crypto angle of using crypto, and so I will say the founder of SingularityNet was previously involved and kind of the head of a company that did Sophia, the robot that generated a lot of headlines, but was really not using AI seemingly. So I've been a skeptic of SingularityNet. I'm not sure how seriously to take this article, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got enough money to build a supercomputer. So we shall see.
Yeah. So their founder is a guy called Ben Goertzel, who is sort of pseudo famous for being one of the people who is credited with coining the term AGI. And he's been into this space since like the early 2000s, maybe even before. Very unique and unusual character. And you're right. There's always been this like crypto angle to the story. I spoke to him back in the day when I was doing the Towards Data Science podcast. There's actually an interview that we had there. So if you're interested in like his kind of deeper thoughts on AGI, don't necessarily agree with his approach. I don't particularly think that it's the way to go. But there are a lot of views in this space, and everybody's doing their own thing. So I just thought this was kind of interesting because he's gotten his hands on a decent amount of hardware to do this. It's this interesting, everything that Ben Goertzel does seems to have this very chaotic characteristic to it. So this is really about decentralizing intelligence. That's the whole play here. And they've gotten their hands on a whole bunch of different hardware. They've got, like L40S GPUs from NVIDIA. They've got H200s as well. They've got GB200s, which is like the full-on kind of modern cutting-edge NVIDIA stuff. Even stuff from Tenstor. So kind of pretty unusual heterodox hardware mix. And it's all neurosymbolic as well. So it's not just a scaling play. Anyway, I thought this is interesting because there's a lot of money chasing this kind of, you might think of it as weird or fringe hypothesis. In my mind, that's what it is. It's obviously a bad idea to label anything like that because you never know where breakthroughs are going to come from. But the play here is, he's going to try to build this decentralized network. It's got this system where if you want to buy into the network, you actually have to feed it tokens. It seems like I believe text tokens or image token, like basically data to get access. So it seems to be some system where you pay to play, and the currency is something like data. As with many cases with Ben Goertzel, I'm a little confused as to how this is supposed to work. But he's no doubt a very smart individual, and this is another potentially interesting path.
On to research and advancements, and the first story is coming from Sakana AI, which was founded, I think, just last year, and was looking to experiment with slightly different approaches to LLMs. This research from them is the AI scientist towards fully automated, open-ended scientific discovery. And this is essentially a framework where they take chatbots and LLMs and introduce a process where you begin with idea generation. It has this idea and plan for innovation. Then they do a novelty check via semantic scholar. They then score the ideas. That moves to experiments. They have an experiment template. They generate code, execute it, generate plots, and eventually they actually write a paper, lead to a manuscript, and have LLM paper reviewing, and that just goes on in a loop. And so this is kind of just showing this entire process that they can develop. And as an example, they show in the paper, such a paper might be adaptive dual scale denoising for dynamic feature balancing and low dimension diffusion models, which does sound like a kind of thing you would see at a machine learning conference. And they do claim that this AI scientist can produce papers that exceed the acceptance threshold at a top machine learning conference according to their automated reviewer, which, kind of a big deal if that's the case. So they say that it costs $15 to do one pass of this model, although, experiments cost a lot more than that depending on what you're doing. So I'm not sure that's totally true. Certainly interesting. We've seen a lot of conversation, especially at OpenAI, around LLMs scaling to a point where they can do the research themselves and self-improve. And this is potentially an indication of movement in that direction.
Yeah, I thought this paper was extraordinarily interesting in a lot of different ways. So they ran this on a single kind of eightfold H100 node over the course of a week. So all these experiments generating hundreds of papers, they say, were largely run just using that amount of compute. So that's quite interesting and quite a lot to squeeze out of one node like that. Overwhelming majority of the costs that were associated with this were associated with the coding and paper writing steps. Now, I think it's worth understanding just a little bit what the phases of this kind of process. This basically, it's an agent, right? It's an AI agent that writes papers end to end. So they'll start off by giving the model a little bit of starting code. They call this a starting code template. And what it does is it just it reproduces some very lightweight, simple baseline training run from a popular model or a benchmark. So, for example, think of the code that would train a small transformer on the works of Shakespeare, right? So we start with this baby code base, and we basically have the model come up with ideas based on that code base. What are some experiments you could run that would identify novel things that haven't been done before, that would just modify that code base and extend it in that direction, and then sort of do multiple loops with chain of thought and self-reflection to iteratively improve that. One of the interesting things that they do as they're trying to get the agent to come up with new ideas is they have it score those ideas, essentially self-assessed scores. They have it score its own ideas along the dimensions of interestingness, novelty, and feasibility. Now, interestingness is interesting. It's a metric that's often used in the context of open-ended learning. And there's a guy called Ken Stanley who really pioneered this space at OpenAI, or well, before he joined OpenAI, then he joined, then he left. But he's always been a fan of looking at interestingness of experiments and trying to quantify that so you can train models to pursue interesting things. And so that's very much what this is, targeting. And because we have language models now that can actually kind of distill a sense of interestingness in some sense, because they'll learn that over the course of their training, what humans at least think of as interesting, that you can actually bake that in here. So I thought that was really interesting. Well, interesting. That's the kind of ideation step. Then anyway, they set up a bunch of experiments. These involve doing essentially code level changes to the experiment template, that bit of baby code that was first fed in. So start kind of making edits to that using a coding assistant called Aider, which is a state-of-the-art coding assistant. And along the way, it will then take those results and then write notes in the style of an experimental journal. Those then get fed into a prompt to generate the paper and the write-up. And then there's this whole automatic paper reviewing process. They have a GPT-4o based agent that does the paper review, and they feed it guidelines from a standard machine learning conference to determine whether the paper should pass muster. So I thought this was really interesting. One of the most interesting parts of it is in the problems and the discussion at the end. So first problem they run into, hallucinations are not gone, unsurprisingly. So the paper claims that, so this is the AI generated paper they talk about. It claims that they used V100 GPUs, even though the agent couldn't possibly have known what the actual hardware was that they used. In reality, of course, they used those H100s. And it also guessed the PyTorch version without checking. So unsurprisingly, agent doesn't have access to that information, but it's the kind of information that would show up in papers. And so it tries to hallucinate it. They also see this really interesting thing where it tries to put a positive spin on negative results. And so they talk about, they've got this experiment where they're trying to reduce the KL divergence, basically the Kullback-Leibler divergence, which is a score of, anyway, it doesn't matter. But so they talk about, they achieved the model writes a 12.8% reduction. And they say lower KL is better. And then the bad results are reported as a 3.3% improvement instead of an increase, which is actually bad. They decide to spin it. The model decides to spin it as an improvement from a better KL score to a worse one. So that's kind of amusing. All kinds of artifacts that show up as well beyond that, including it doesn't always correctly explain why the results are the way they are. It often gets the interpretation of its own experiments wrong, despite sometimes getting some downright impressive results. And so they describe the level of understanding of the system as being at sort of a low-level early researcher type of thing, where it can run good experiments, interesting experiments, get good results, but often interprets them incorrectly. One last thing worth noting here, and this for me is actually the biggest take home. So they talk about some experiments that they ran. And they say, I'll just read straight from the document because this is such a great summary. In some cases, when the AI scientists' experiments exceeded our imposed time limits, so they put a time limit, right, for the agent as it starts to do its experiments, it attempted to edit the code to extend the time limit arbitrarily instead of trying to shorten the runtime. While creative, the act of bypassing the experimenter's imposed constraints has Potential implications for AI safety? No shit. So basically, we have here, as far as I know, the first instance of, like, in any other context, the only term that would be appropriate for this sort of thing would be power seeking. There's actually a whole branch of AI research that's associated with understanding why and when this sort of thing happens. It is expected to be the default behavior of very capable systems when you give them a wide action space. You end up finding that, yeah, the model will find a better solution than you had ever thought of to achieve the objective that it is pursuing. And in this case, it's trying to get interesting results. It finds that, hey, you know what? You've tried to limit its runtime. So yeah, it's going to go into its own code and edit it to try to give itself fewer constraints. And they point out, if this kind of thing were encouraged to find novel, interesting biological materials and given access to cloud labs where robots perform wet lab biology experiments, it could, without its overseer's intent, create new dangerous viruses or poisons that harm people before we can intervene. Even in computers, if tasked to create new, interesting functional software, it could create dangerous malware. This, to people in AI safety, is like the least surprising result, but a lot of people were really shocked to see this. I kind of find this moderately amusing and in a way, hopefully a bit of a wake-up call. The researchers on this paper have impeccable pedigrees. Like, these are really serious people who, like, backgrounds at, like Facebook AI research and Google and so on. This is a real deal. Sure, you can come up with blockers for this, but they themselves flag, hey, we're like starting to venture into super alignment risk territory here. If we make these models generate their own novel research to the point where we can't track, like, what is actually coming out of this, and then that research ends up being incorporated by the model into its own sort of training set, which is exactly, by the way, what's happening with this architecture. Pretty soon, these sorts of failure modes start to get really exotic and hard to track. And so anyway, I thought this was a really, really interesting result for so many reasons. So congrats to the team. And there's the AI scientist for you.
Right, and as a former AI researcher, it's pretty fun to see, like, literal AI research papers of the type you see at these conferences as examples of what the model output. And I think, to call some other notable aspects of this out, the way all of this is implemented is not doing any training at all. So it's all just prompts that tell the system of the existing models, and they do compare, they have experiments with GPT-4o and Llama and so on, just tell it to do these various steps. So for instance, at the first stage of idea generation, they tell the model, you are an ambitious AI PhD student who is looking to publish a paper that will contribute significantly to the field. And then there's a whole bunch of explanation on what you should be doing. They say in JSON, provide a new idea with the following fields: name, title, experiment, interestingness, etc., etc. Then when you get to paper reviewing, they again prompt the model, you are an AI researcher who's reviewing a paper that was submitted to a prestigious ML venue. And they give it the actual Europe's reviewer guidelines and a few examples. So it literally produces the same kinds of scores and format as you see and read for these kinds of conferences. So to me, also notable as an example of trying to have an agent, an agentic framework where you take existing models and then specialize them via prompts, via kind of a pipeline and a tool usage, like being able to query and run code and write code to accomplish some means. And that does have certain, it does have failure modes, as you said. There's hallucination. Also, in the steps of coding and then writing a paper in LaTeX, a pretty large fraction of the time it fails. I believe with the top performer of Claude, they had 51 generated ideas. Only about 35, 36 of those were able to get to the end with experiments and having a written paper. Lots of other caveats, but overall, certainly a pretty interesting result. And we'll be seeing if, in fact, apparently this AI reviewer thought that it was able to generate papers that were better than existing papers. So I think very interesting to see if in fact, this will generate some novel concepts that are useful in practice.
Yeah, and if we needed more evidence, by the way, that Claude Sonnet 3.5 actually is better than GPT-4o, at least currently, this also, there's a great table 3 in the paper that does show you how they compare. So they have that, Sonnet 3.5, GPT-4o, DeepSeek Coder, and Llama 3.1, the full 405 billion parameter version. In each case, they start them off with 51 total ideas, and then they show you like how many of those ideas qualified as novel, how many of those actually resulted in experiments that were successfully executed, and how many resulted in completed papers. And I mean, you see Sonnet 3.5 way ahead of GPT-4o. So 38 out of the 51 going all the way to completed papers, whereas just 16 out of the 51 for GPT-4o made it. So kind of interesting. Obviously hard to tell. This doesn't tell you about the paper quality. There's also a mean score, which Sonnet 3.5 beats GPT-4o on as well, and then total cost too. So anyway, just really interesting, worth diving into, and a lot of weirdness, man. Like we talked about tweaking its own code to try to increase its runtime. There's other stuff too. Check it out. Like read the paper. It apparently occasionally tried to just like import some unfamiliar Python libraries, so massive security risk there. It would just like write code in the experiment file that initiated a system call to relaunch itself, which caused an uncontrolled increase in Python processes, and eventually they had to intervene manually. It tried to edit the code to save a checkpoint for every single update step, which took up almost a terabyte of storage. There's all kinds of cool stuff. What happens when you take the shackles off and just let your high-powered agent run wild. So there you have it.
And real quick, table 3 actually, so you have multiple tables here. So they
for
look
different
at
papers.
Yeah, for types of papers. So they actually have a few specific things like diffusion modeling, language modeling. They do, so they kind of direct the AI scientist in a way. They say, like, here's your general topic, here's the code template to start with. And across these different types of areas of research, you get different results. So you do get, for table 3, 38 papers completed out of 51, then 20 out of 52, etc. So not quite a fully independent AI researcher here, but still, pretty independent. Like these are pretty broad areas of research. Next paper, Imagen Free. So we've covered Imagen Free. The announcement was a little while ago. This is the text-to-image generator from Google. And now we have the technical report out on Archive. And as you might have expected, looking through this paper, not much you can glean aside from evaluation. That's pretty much what they present in this paper. A little bit of data, a lot on evaluation and risks and so on, saying that this is very impressive. Also includes a model card. So that does tell us a little bit, like training data set is the Imagen Free model was trained on a large data set comprising images, text, and associated annotations. So not super useful. A little bit more details on the hardware front. But in general, I think mostly focusing on the results and things like responsible deployment. Still, always fun to get a little more insight into these frontier models, and nice to see Google still releasing technical reports.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the one thing they do say on the data side is that the the model rather, was trained on a mix of synthetic captions using Gemini that were generated for each image, and also original human written captions. So somehow they're combining the two. We don't know how exactly. There are filters involved, of course, but they say multiple Gemini models and instructions to maximize the linguistic diversity and quality of these synthetic captions. So presumably, this is about capturing different ways of expressing what's in an image to make the model more robust. So language models supporting vision models all the way down. It's just turtles as far as the eye can see.
Right. And to be fair to the paper, they do compare on some things like visual appeal. Imagen Free actually loses out to Midjourney V6. on various benchmarks. So, we're not just tooting their own horn. This is actually kind of interesting. They do beat out on prompt image alignment and some things like reasoning. So Midjourney V6 still the prettiest image generator out there, apparently. Just a couple more research papers. The next one is the data addition dilemma. And this is kind of interesting. They say that in general, counterintuitively, adding more data when training may not always be what you want. So they demonstrate that adding training data in a multi-source scaling context can at times result in reduced overall accuracy, uncertain fairness outcomes, and reduced overall performance in a given subgroup. So, it's a little bit niche in the sense that it is looking at kind of a few types of topics and not necessarily as like general purpose as something like ChatGPT. But in some sense, it's an interesting, maybe conceptual result.
I think, I was looking at this paper. There's a lot of talk about it on Twitter this week or on X this week. I guess I didn't find it that moving because it seemed like a pretty unsurprising result. Like if you think about it, I mean, the argument here is so we should be surprised that more data is not always better, especially when that data comes from many different sources. Now, if you think about it, let's think about it from a language model standpoint, for example. Data coming from different sources, you could think of it as like data coming from different writers with different styles, right? And if you're going to train a model on a large amount of text that is just written by Andre, that model is going to answer like Andre. But now, if you add a little bit of text from me, then all of a sudden the model, before it starts like generating the text or deciding what it wants to write, it's got to also decide which style to key into. And now there are kind of two styles to decide between. So it's got to consume some of its compute, some of its reasoning energy, if you will, as it tries to figure out which writer to emulate. This is the same problem that they're flagging in the medical domain, where they're basically saying, okay, well, we've got data from different hospitals. And when we combine that data together, sometimes that kind of throws our system off, and adding more of that data doesn't help. Well, to me, that seems kind of unsurprising because essentially what you're doing is you're adding potentially a small amount of data from other sources that doesn't quite match the same trends as it's not in distribution relative to the data you already had. And so no surprise, the model is just thrown off because until it has enough data to actually master fully that additional new distribution, it's essentially just being confronted with an additional bit of kind of confusion, an additional layer to the problem where now I have to figure out which hospital, in some sense, the data came from, or which hospital's data this data is most like before I can make a prediction. So, it's really great to see it quantified, and they've done a great job. I should really say this is not a knock on the paper at all. They've done a great job of proposing a bunch of solutions and fixes, and it's great to have quantitative investigations of this kind of phenomenon. But at a high level, the thing that is surprising here is not, or I don't think ought to be, the fact that, guess what, models can't reason out of distribution very easily. It's it's more the kind of empirical investigation and some of the solutions. So interesting paper, but I don't know, maybe not to me. And I'm curious if listeners have another perspective here, if you're involved in writing the paper or something like that. But I didn't find the thing that was being discussed on Twitter to be the thing that was most interesting about the paper.
Right. I don't think the paper itself frames it as like scaling is not always right. The question posed is, when does adding more data help and when does it hinder process on desired model outcomes in real world settings? And they do establish a theoretical framework, a way to evaluate and answer that question. Most likely on Twitter, people were saying, oh, wow, maybe scaling is not the right thing, blah, blah, blah. But this paper is a little more specific.
Yeah, no, sorry. I didn't mean to suggest that they were saying scaling doesn't work on that basis, but more just that like the discovery that data from different sources doesn't always improve. Like there's this additional layer of training that you're forcing the model to go through that was kind of absent from the, I don't know, I guess, to some of the people I've been talking to, it just seems like a pretty clear inference that this would happen. But anyway, who knows? Different bubbles, right? So that's how it goes.
And the final paper is LongWriter, unleashing 10,000 word plus generation for long context LLMs. So they say that LLMs struggle to generate outputs exceeding 2,000 words. And that, according to the paper, is due to the scarcity of examples of long outputs that you use during training. And so they address this with Agent Write, a pipeline that breaks down ultra-long generation tasks into subtasks and can lead to LLMs generating coherent outputs exceeding 20,000 words. They also create LongWriter 6K, which is a data set with outputs ranging from 2,000 to 32,000 tokens in length. So another example of an agentic paper where you take an existing model and then kind of put it into a framework and a set of instructions that leverages it to do things that the base model cannot do. And, pretty significant thing potentially for being able to generate really long things.
Yeah, they're making the case that, typically in fine-tuning data sets, you don't tend to see a lot of long output examples. Like you don't see a lot of giant pieces of text that might push the limits of 200,000 words or so. And as a result, when you fine-tune on those data sets, you tend to bias the model towards generating shorter outputs. So to fix that, you break it down so that you basically iteratively have the model write in chunks of, say, 2,000 words or whatever it'll put out. Together, that can make a longer document. And now you have a data set you can use for supervised fine tuning. So they have done that. And it's kind of interesting. It's not something that I've actually run into day to day. So just, I guess it goes to show sometimes you don't need the long form text generation to that degree. But I'm sure there are tons of use cases where you would. So really interesting to see this result. This does come, by the way, by way of Tsinghua University and Zhipu AI. We talk about the latter quite a bit on the show, and Tsinghua University is very big, prestigious university in China with somewhat of an AGI focus these days as well. So there you have it.
Right. And just to really quickly cover it, as you might expect, the general idea is you first plan an outline, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 15, with each one having some word requirements. So we have an example of a 30,000 word article on the history of the Roman Empire. First, we break it down, then they write each individual bit. So might lead to some things that people have seen when you write, like when people put out these spammy books on Amazon, they do repeat themselves often and have these kinds of artifacts. Could be the case still in this paper, but I'm sure they do have techniques to address that. On to policy and safety. First story is a safety one. MIT researchers release a repository of AI risks. So this is a database of over 700 AI risks that is meant to guide stakeholders in industry, academia, and policymakers. There's a categorization by causal factors, domains, and subdomains. And this was created in collaboration with a bunch of other organization, Future Life Institute, for instance, and AI startups as well. They do say that third-party frameworks can overlook certain risks, like the pollution of the information ecosystem, aka AI-generated spam. And so, presumably pretty useful, just if nothing else, to document the various negative impacts that can happen due to AI models.
Yeah, and this has been, when we were doing our first investigation into the kind of safety and security situation around frontier AI development, one of the things that kept coming up, engaging with government stakeholders and this and that, was how exhaustive do you need to go, right? Like, how can you possibly categorize all of the risks associated with AI and have a comprehensive overview of the space? And our take was ultimately, well, we're going to zero in only on risks that we feel rise to the level of catastrophic national security emergencies, and not even bother trying with the rest. And that's one way you can carve out the problem to make it manageable. But this is this is a needed thing, because you would always, in that frame, right? Like, we would keep running into the situation where people would come up with new risks to flag. They'd be like, oh yeah, what about this? What about that? And you do your best to cluster them, but it is really hard. And in that context, you can imagine how hard it might be to write legislation, right? You have one legislative office that's like, oh, I want to deal with, bio risk from AI and cyber risk. And then you have another that's like, oh, what about information operations? And now they've got to negotiate, decide whether it's two separate bills, one bill. If you put it all in one bill, how many different measures are you going to have? How specific is it going to be? All that jazz. So having this kind of comprehensive repository, I think, is a really, really good move. Harmony Intelligence, by the way, is a really interesting company in its own right. That's the company that one of the leaders of this project was from. But anyway, so the coverage, they're saying that we found that the average frameworks just mentioned 34% of the 23 risk subdomains we identified, and nearly a quarter covered less than 20%. No document or overview mentioned all 23 risk subdomains, and the most comprehensive covered only 70%. When the literature is this fragmented, we shouldn't assume that we were all on the same page about these risks, which is very, very true. So yeah, good to see this research out there, and hopefully it helps to give people a bit of a touchstone so they can orient around the risk classes that they care about.
That's right. If you want a mega AI risk framework, this is kind of doing that, unifying all the existing safety frameworks, of which there are a ton, into one, all-encompassing, I guess, framework. Next, the story is Elon Musk addresses power issues at XAI supercomputer facility in Memphis. So just recently, we were talking about this facility that's being created, meant to house, I think, is it 10,000 or 100,000 GPUs? I forget. I think 100,000 by the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah. And it might actually be more by then. I think the first cluster built Grok 2. Yeah.
Yeah, they used 10,000 for the first run of Grok, and they aim to use 100,000 for this one. And so they have been in the process of creating this facility. We covered how that is actually pretty disruptive, because you need new infrastructure for power, for water processing, things like that. And so this article just mentions briefly how in an episode on a podcast last week, Musk did say it's not working yet. There are some, quote, power fluctuation issues, what he called extreme power jitter.
Extreme power jitter. You've just been working with ordinary power jitter, but Elon gets to work with extreme power jitter.
Yes. Extreme power jitter, giant shifts, 10 to 20 megawatts, several times a second, that kind of things. That's about all we hear. And so this is just reinforcing that knowledge that when you try and build supercomputing facility for these kinds of AI models, that comes along with a lot of needed infrastructure, and it does consume crazy amounts of power.
And it was unclear from this conversation, like, what exactly the issue was. But one common issue is, when you're doing a training run, you need a constant fixed rate of insanely high power consumption. So you need high baseload power, is what that means. You can't have fluctuations. So, wind and solar can be a real issue because the sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. You quickly find yourself in a situation where, like, your training run just can't operate, which is part of the reason why people have criticized, for example, Meta for building wind and solar plants to supposedly power their some of their AI training runs, or to accompany a lot of their data center buildouts, because it's like that stuff doesn't actually solve the problem. It looks good from an environmental standpoint, makes a good headline, but it's not actually addressing the issue. So anyway, part of the reason why people are getting more excited about nuclear for this.
One more story in this section. FCC proposes new rules on AI-powered robocalls. So this is the Federal Communications Commission in the US, and this is related to companies, businesses using AI to generate robocalls and text and having to disclose the use of AI in those kinds of things. So this could lead to businesses needing to revise scripts and potentially, not use AI if that is actually a problem for those businesses when communicating with customers. And presumably a good call. We do see now with ChatGPT, with 11 Labs, you can get super realistic. Some companies may want to use that to kind of replace humans. Good that at least we'll know if we're talking to an AI voice if we do get these kinds of calls.
Yeah, and there has been a really large rise in robocalls and this sort of thing in the last year. Actually, has been apparently, when I talk to people in the space, like they've seen a huge spike. So apparently this is not final. So the rules may come into effect. There's a period of public comment. So you can, if you want, get in touch with the FCC and let them know what you think of Notice FCC 24-84, which is what this is.
And just a couple more stories in our synthetic media and art section. The first one is going back to a topic we have covered quite a few times now, SAG-AFTRA, the Union for Actors and Performance. And this time around, it is about how they have a deal with the startup firm Narrative for digital voice replicas. So this means that there's now a deal for the use of audio voice replicas of actors in performance in digital advertising. And this would mean that actors can create an AI version of their voice, and there would be Narrative's online marketplace where advertisers can create audio ads essentially using these AI tools. And the 160,000 members of SAG-AFTRA can add themselves to the database to connect their voices to advertiser. So kind of an important development in the sense that a lot of the concern and some of the reasons for striking what we've seen in the industry over the past couple of years has been this question of what do you do with replicas, with kind of AI versions of actors that might be used in ads and so on. This seems to be a pretty significant answer to that, at least in the audio domain.
Yeah, it is. It's also a bit of a challenge in terms of the already significant problem in the space where you have a small number of really big winners, and it's very difficult for like lower tier actors, for example, to break in. There's not a lot of work to go around. You got a couple of big winners. This is going to make that even worse, right? Because one of the things that makes it challenging is for people to scale themselves even further, for the big winners to become even bigger winners, is that previously they could only do so much work. They could only do the work of one normal person. If you can automate the voice, if you can essentially you're scaling up essentially the footprint of that performer. And so even with agreements like this, there are fundamental economic drivers with AI that make this stuff interestingly challenging. So yes, you may find that people are compensated more fairly for the work they do, but you may find that people like, Morgan Freeman are then in crazy, crazy high demand and their voice is popping up everywhere, whereas, others may struggle more. So kind of interesting. We're going to have to see what actually in practice ends up happening with the market dynamics around this. Do you see people kind of spreading out, trying to get more kind of a wider range of more diverse voices that people don't recognize? Or are we going to see people double down on the same kind of same small number of winners? But either way, this is going to be precedent setting and very interesting in development from the space.
And as you might expect, the other bit of this, not only are the actors going to get paid, they do have full control of how this replica will be used. So they choose how much they get paid, they can specify ad preferences, and they do have to confirm to give a thumbs up for every single use. So they can read the copy, they can listen to it, and they can refuse to have their voice used. And this is setting some precedents for future replicas. And one last story, this one from the New York Times, kind of an interesting one. This is how deepfake Elon Musk has become the internet's biggest scammer. So you may have seen this if you've been on Twitter, for instance, where I think this is pretty prevalent. There's been a lot of scams being done with deepfakes, and in particular deepfakes of Elon Musk's, with ads for things like crypto, for things like giveaways, things like, send me X Bitcoin to this wallet and I will send you way more. And these kinds of deepfake videos are promoted on social media platforms, including paid ads on Facebook and also Twitter, presumably. And they say that Elon Musk is featured in nearly a quarter of all deepfake scams since last year.
Holy shit.
Nearly 90% of those focused on crypto. There are some other examples of deepfake ads with Warren Buffett and Jeff Bezos. So I guess not surprising in a sense that Elon Musk might be the top deepfake out there. He is, I guess, kind of a crazy guy. So you might believe the scam as opposed to Warren Buffett doing some weird crypto stuff. But once again, do be aware that scammers are starting to use deepfakes in a big way.
Yeah, and make sure to send your Bitcoin to the crypto wallet address that is included in the show notes. We do appreciate it. We will, of course, send you back double a Bitcoin for any payments sent our way. Anyway, this is a fun story. I mean, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what Elon does with this, because obviously he has a commitment to, as much as possible, propagate fully open kind of discourse on X. Obviously, that does not include scams and stuff like that. Elon has some lines on anyway, what he thinks of as acceptable speech on the platform, but trying to identify these things is going to be really, really hard. Deepfake detectors are going to be important, but that arms race, right, between generation and detection is going to get harder and harder to win. So we'll see if that 90% number, I can't believe that Elon is in 90% of these.
Elon is 90% of the ads are focused on crypto. Elon is in a quarter of all deepfakes, but still.
I mean, can you imagine if that was you though? I mean, you just seen your face promoting all these, that'd be something else. So I imagine this is on his radar and he's probably interested in doing something about it. So we'll see.
And, it seems a bit funny, but it's also a real issue. They do have an example in this article of one person from Texas said he lost 36,000 worth of Bitcoin after seeing something like this in a YouTube video. And there's a lot of tragedy going on with these kinds of scams. And as an example, YouTube did say it removed more than 15.7 million channels and 8.2 million videos between January to March this year.
I cannot.
A lot of those are not necessarily deepfakes, but you must imagine a lot of them are.
I can't believe they got all 8.2 million of my videos. I'm so bummed. Anyway, it's a lot of deletion.
Alrighty, that's it for this episode. Fewer stories than usual, but somehow we managed to go for as long as we usually do. We are very skilled at that, it seems. So thank you if you did stick around to the end. We do appreciate it if you review the podcast, if you share it, if you just email us with some thoughts and questions and letting me know that I messed up on publishing the latest episode. That's very appreciated. And I definitely do keep tuning in and enjoy this AI outro.
News is dropping, so let's get in tune. AI Grok to innovation so soon. X unleashed to the images fly. FalconMamba, we're reaching the sky. Oh, we're breaking it down, you'll see. News from AI, it's last week's read. Get ready, cause there's so much to know. Tune in, we'll see you in the show. stories fresh, straight off the press. AI's a buzz, we're ahead of the rest. From Grok's upgrade to Falcon's flight, in the AI lab, making futures bright. All the way breaking it down, you'll see news from AI. It's like sweet speed. Get ready, 'cause there's so much to know. Tune in, we're seeing the show. Keep your eyes open, the world's on the track. From labs to the headlines, there's no turning back. Hey guys, scientists, pushing the brain. New visions every day, blink and you'll hear. Oh, we're breaking it down, you'll see news from AI. It's like sweet speed. Get ready, 'cause there's so much to know. Tune in, we're seeing the show.
From art to all things new, behind every discovery is a breakthrough. Stay with us, the future is bright. Every story bears new light.
Oh, we're breaking it down, you'll see news from AI. It's like sweet speed.